Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, senior editor at Forbes. Tensions remain high in Minneapolis, which has been consumed by the ongoing presence of ICE agents, as well as protests against the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. Over the last 3 weeks, federal agents have killed 2 people, and just last night, Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar was attacked during a town hall. Joining us to discuss these developments is Minneapolis City Council member Robin Wonsley. Councilmember Wonsley, thank you so much for joining us. I want to start by asking, how are you? How are you feeling?
I would be lying if I said I wasn't, exhausted and just completely spent by just the effects and overwhelming effects of the occupation we've been experienced by ICE agents. But I'm also being carried by just the collective strength that's been demonstrated by ordinary people who continuously, in light of us losing Renee Good and Alex Petrie at the hands of these ICE agents, they are continuously going out on the streets, putting their bodies on the line to help protect our neighbors, getting them to their grocery stores or getting them groceries, helping raise dollars to cover their rents, or even just doing patrols. I every single day I wake up in awe just by the courage and the tenacity of our residents who are leading with love, who are leading with compassion in such very challenging times. And also doing so in a way that hopefully inspires other cities that they can also organize resistance quite effectively against the Trump administration as they're using immigration as a way to normalize their campaign of cruelty all across the country.
What is important for the Forbes audience to know about what is happening on the ground right now? We've seen images over the course of the weekend and the early part of this week, but at this point on Wednesday afternoon, what did you see when you came into work today? Are people still in the streets? Can you just give us a bit of a picture of what is happening in your neighborhood?
Absolutely. Early this morning, I drove past my neighborhood school and saw regular, ordinary people outside in their green and yellow vests, making sure that our students and babies can get to school safely, because we've seen ICE carry out attacks at our public schools and have made it so that hundreds of families are afraid to leave their homes and are exercising remote learning opportunities so that they don't have to come in contact with ICE. But for those who are looking to go to our schools, it's ordinary neighbors coming in and organizing escorts. And I saw that today, and I still see people with whistles doing patrols all across our communities. I'm still seeing residents advocate for different mutual aid efforts specifically geared at raising dollars for rental assistance because rent is due on February 1st. And Governor Walz has not declared an eviction moratorium to allow residents to shelter in place here in Minneapolis and all across the state, so we don't have to come in contact with ICE agents and risk our lives or risk being abducted. So I'm still seeing regular people continue to do everything that they can to protect our neighbors, because we celebrate the news of Bovino leaving, but we still have thousands of ICE agents still patrolling and occupying our neighborhoods. So there hasn't been a shift of letting their guards down. It's saying, well, ICE is still here, so we still have to remain diligent and protect one another.
I'm glad you mentioned Bovino. Of course, the Border Patrol commander was dismissed from his position earlier this week, but President Trump sent border czar Tom Homan to Minneapolis. Have you seen a change since that change occurred, or has it been kind of the same as we've seen week after week this month?
There has been absolutely no change. And I think Democratic leaders who celebrated this essential swapsies from Bovino to Tom was very miscalculated. Just all this morning, I got numerous hits on various rapid response lines about how ICE was intensifying their tactics of abductions in one of our most historically working class Black communities, where they actually shot someone just a week ago, and people asking for support and in responding to helping care and protect that neighborhood. So we've seen no shifts. There's just been a changing of the face of the same operation, which is to abduct residents, to violate a multitude of rights that we hold as individuals and even as states, and to normalize just circumventing due process by essentially setting the standard that ICE agents can come into our communities, destabilize them, abduct people, kill them, and there's no consequences. And then we're just supposed to run them $1 billion to keep doing so in the next city. So we've seen no changes. And I think that's the most important part too for those are watching. We're asking you to join us in our efforts. Also pass your own eviction moratoriums, continue to support organizing efforts around mutual aid, because this is coming to a city near you. They're testing all these things out and the intent with the intention of moving them right over to the next city when they're done here. And we best believe also, no, they will come back to Minneapolis. They will come back to Los Angeles. They will come back to Chicago. So it's very important that the testing that they're doing here, we show the utmost resistance to, because they're still going on as business as usual.
Now, on Wednesday, President Trump did warn the mayor of Minneapolis that he is playing with fire. He told Mayor Jacob Frey that his refusal to cooperate with federal authorities is, quote, a very serious violation of the law. What do you make of the president's statement, and what do you also make of how the mayor of Minneapolis has been handling this situation?
Well, first, in responding to the comments made by Trump, they're outright comical. For someone who has multiple felonies, who is outright using a government agency in the form of domestic terrorism and going and killing civilians, regardless if you have citizenship or not, for legally observing or for supporting their neighbors to get to their schools in the case of Renee Good, and then giving those federal agents a pass to do so here and then go off and do it in the next city. That man has no space to talk about what is legal when he doesn't practice it himself. Now, in the case of how our mayor, Jacob Frey, is handling the response, it's no secret my office has absolutely asked the mayor to also fully use the extent of his authority to protect our neighbors and his constituents while we're experiencing this occupation. The fullest way in which he could do that, most clearest way, is he oversees the police. And one of the things that we've asked is, can the police, because they're not, stopping ICE from terrorizing residents, but can they take on some of the responsibilities that ordinary people are taking on to protect their neighbors? And that's doing the legal observations, again, as Alex Preti was doing. Can an officer do that instead, so that residents don't have to worry about potentially getting shot and killed while documenting ICE agents in their activities, their horrible activities, which is something that our governor said keep doing? Could our law enforcement officers help put barricades in areas that are being hit, the heaviest by ICE agents, something that they did just 2 years ago for another safety matter? There's a whole host of things that Mayor Frey could do. Also, can he lobby the governor to enact a eviction moratorium so that residents can shelter in place here in Minneapolis and all across the state, so that we're not coming in contact with heightened frequency with these domestic terrorists that's abducting our neighbors and killing them? There's a multitude of things that Mayor Frey could do in this moment that we are seeing him not pursue. And I'm just deeply proud, though, of city council members who are out doing the patrols. We're bringing funding next week to support rental assistance and legal services for our residents. And we're doing everything that we can to evade evictions for Minneapolis residents as well, since we don't have that eviction moratorium in place. We're doing everything possible, and we want to see our mayor match that same energy. So there's shortcomings, but there's still opportunities for him to exercise more responsiveness to match the courage of our neighbors.
When you talk about the courage of the neighbors and the whistling and the patrols, I was listening to a few podcasts across multiple political spectrum to prepare for this conversation. And in some sectors of the internet, you hear people saying that the whistles are interfering with ICE, that citizens are interfering, and it's inflaming tensions, that if there weren't protests, we wouldn't have 2 people dead. What is your response to those who say that the protesters themselves are inflaming the situation on the ground?
What I want to look to is history, and history has shown that in any moment of grave injustice and where communities organize to protest against that injustice, there's never been a quote unquote right way to do it. And we're demonizing, during the civil rights, where literally people marched or, took up space at lunch counters and people were yelling, that's not how you peacefully protest. And then the same applies right now. How do you justify a case like Alex Petrie, who literally had his phone and was recording, which is your constitutional right? You can document law enforcement activities. And he was shot and killed shot multiple times and then ultimately killed for doing so. Is that not the right way? Same. And I think, we can't get backed into this corner of there's a right way out of extreme violence when it's being inflicted upon you. And right now, that is all that people have right now. They have their cameras, they have whistles, they have bullhorns. And I'm sorry to say, if you are an ICE agent that signed up to go protect and get criminals and, take on this stressful job, if you can't withstand some whistles being blown at you and without being trigger happy, you should absolutely look for a different job. That's not the career field you should be in. You should have no engagement with individuals. You probably shouldn't have a family then. Can you not withstand, if you have a kid, crying at all nights? Do you also feel the inclination to shoot and kill them? That's a problem if you can't handle some whistles and some noise as the people's only means for protecting and caring from one another as you carry out horrible actions on their communities. So I don't like to get caught up in the whole, there will never be a right way. And I'm, again, just proud of our neighbors who are ignoring that type of noise and are continuously showing up every single day to make it known that this immigration operation being waged by Trump, it's not acceptable and we're not going to tolerate it.
It's not acceptable and we're not going to tolerate it. Of course, the president did campaign on an immigration crackdown. So is there any way forward? Is there any way that Minneapolis would accept an immigration crackdown? What would that look like in a different form, in an ideal form?
I'm not hearing acceptance. What I'm hearing is abolition of ICE. And I get to be part of the generation that said I lived during a period where we did not have ICE established as an agency. And things got on just fine. So this idea that we have to accept this new or this mandate around immigration that allows agents to come into your communities and kill at will and with impunity and violate constitutional and human rights, that is not acceptable. And that has not always been the state of course or normalcy when it's come to immigration proceedings. And many of our neighbors understand that we don't want to see this be reformed. Reform is not the answer. Body cams are not the answer. ICE agents already have body cams and they just choose not to use it. What we're advocating for is full abolition of this institution. This is not something or an institution that's actually keeping our community safe. It's very clear they don't discern from a quote unquote illegal immigrant between or a 2-year-old or 5-year-old or a civil rights leader who was just incarcerated and in prison just a week ago for also, demonstrating their First Amendment rights. So I would say community members on the ground here, we are fully charging under the banner of not just ICE out of Minnesota, but ICE needs to be out of our country. No one should have to endure the levels of atrocities that we're experiencing here, the levels of occupation that we're experiencing here, nowhere else. And we don't want to see this be carried out anywhere else.
So ICE should be out of the country. Is there any way, council member, that you would recommend dealing with undocumented immigrants? Or is your political position that undocumented immigrants don't need to be uprooted from their lives and kicked out of the country?
What I will say is immigration is constantly used as a wedge issue to make us think that the everyday problems that we experience, from not being able to pay your healthcare bill or your rent, not earning an actual livable wage, instead of actually seeing, Democratic leaders, Republican leaders alike actually, let's say raise minimum wages, actually take on corporations that's constantly pocketing profits at the expense of our collective well-being, and actually enact taxes on the rich so that we can have a higher standard of life and have services that provide us the utmost degree of services so we can have that quality of life. Instead of doing those things, they tell you your immigrant neighbor is the one who's stealing your job. They're the ones causing problems for you and creating a lack of safety in your communities. And what we're saying in this moment is do not fall for that lie. It's a fallacy. It's a distraction to keep you from looking at Trump just orchestrated the largest transfer of wealth to the already most wealthiest households and businesses of our country. And that is why you don't have access to key public benefits, to feed your children, to pay your rent. It's a distraction from those things. And that's what I want us to keep our eye on. How do we take the resources that's being pocketed by some of the wealthiest in our country? How do we take that back and put it back into the pockets of ordinary people, and not worry about your immigrant neighbor who is struggling just like you to keep their lights on, and they go to work just like you so that they can pay their rent and not be evicted?
Final question. There's been a lot of talk of the tensions and bringing down the temperature in Minneapolis. What do you see as the way forward, council member?
ICE leaving. That is like the most simplified. ICE needs to get out of Minnesota. That is the only way you reduce temperatures here, because they are the ones who's raising the temperatures by going out and abducting 2- and 5-year-olds. They're the ones who's making it impossible for people to go to work or go to, their neighboring schools, go to the local bus stop to get to their destinations. They are the ones who are out here leading the cause for the increase in homicide rates in our city. So they are raising the temperatures by creating chaos and instability in our communities. And we didn't have these problems when they were not here. So the best course of action to truly help us be able to respond and gather ourselves from just the immense amount of damage that they've caused to our city is for them to get the hell up out of here.
Minneapolis City Council member Robin Wonsley, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time and your comments today.
Thank you so much, Maggie.